All right, hi, seventh graders. So by now, you guys have gotten your test back from asexual, sexual, mitosis versus meiosis. And so now today we are kicking off genetics. So we're actually looking at into sexual reproduction, and we're tracking how traits are passed down from parent to offspring, or grandparents to parents, and then offspring, right? So anyways, a couple things that we need to remember. So this builds right off of everything that we've already been talking about. So we're going to look at how does an individual inherit the parent's genes, right? So for one, this happens through joining of gametes, the sperm and the egg, right? The male has the sperm that has one set of his chromosomes, and then the female has one set of her chromosomes that she contributes. So then once a sperm and egg join, we make this zygote. Okay, this is a very early on. I don't know if if it has to be unicellular, but when sperm and egg join, they fertilize, and it's just I guess a fertilized egg is what a zygote is. So now we have sperm that had one set, egg that had one set. They come together in the zygote. Now this zygote, the new offspring, has two sets of DNA or two sets of chromosomes. Okay, and so your parents are also diploid, but during meiosis, the sperm goes from the parent sperm cell goes from diploid to haploid, so half, so it has one set. Same thing with the egg. So parents are diploid, but they can only pass on that one set of their DNA to you, and that's what I was just talking about. And so we have to remember this as we keep going through. So there's a lot of traits that they can pass on to you. Sometimes you'll get your mom's traits. Sometimes you get your dad's traits, right? You probably heard this a lot is you look like your dad, or you look like your mom, or you must have gotten that from your mom's side. You must have gotten that from your dad's side, right? That's what this is kind of talking about. And that is very true in this sense. It's literally in your chromosomes that your parents pass on to you. Okay? So let's get on into, so sorry, there was one page I wanted to go through this. So which picture is diploid, which one's haploid? So this diploid, haploid stuff. Well, anyways, these are both the human genome. So these are all the chromosomes that we have, but one of them's diploid and the other one's haploid. Diploid means two, di means two. So we have two sets, right? We have two sets of chromosome 1, we have two sets of chromosome 2, we have two sets of chromosome 3. And we have two sets of all of these guys. Okay, but if I come over here, I only have one set of chromosome 1. 1, or 2, 3, 4. Okay, so I have all of these guys. So this is my haploid. So this looks like a sperm or an egg cell. So meaning your parent is going to pass on half or one set of their chromosomes to you, while the other parent will pass on their one set to you. And then when that sperm and egg meet and join those opposite sets of chromosomes, now you are a diploid organism where one of those is from mom and the other one is from dad. Okay, and on these chromosomes we have things called traits. Okay. And so your parents give you traits like eye color, hair color, if your hair is curly or straight, if you have dimples and things like that. So let's move on. So what we did in class is this is the individual one. So you do this on your own. So it's an inventory of your traits. So traits are the things that you inherit from your parents. Okay, so I have detached earlobes. So this is for you to do. So this is going to be very specific to you, but I don't know if you can kind of see. So most people have this detached earlobe. So it's just the flap of the skin, and it doesn't connect right to your side of your head, right? Where attached earlobes, they're a little less frequent, not super duper. It's not super rare. There's like 3 or 4 in each class that had attached earlobes, but you know that it attaches right to your head, and there's no flap of skin. I can roll my tongue. Can you roll your tongue? So you're going to check yes or no. Dimples. Right-handed. So if you're a right-handed person, you have freckles. I have naturally curly hair. So let's talk about why is I say naturally curly hair? Well, there's people that obviously go to the beauty salon or whatever. You get your hair dyed. You can get your hair curled and stuff like that. And so are you going to pass that stuff that you do after you're born? Are you going to pass that on to your children? No, you're not going to pass on the way you straighten your hair or the way you curl your hair. If you dye your hair blue, you're not going to pass on blue hair to your children. That's not going to seep into your DNA, and that DNA will then be passed on through your egg or your sperm. No, that's not how that works. So that's why it says naturally curly. So you got this from your DNA. It says, I have a cleft chin, butt chin. That's what that means. This one's kind of a cool one. I like this one. I always forget about it. So when you go to fold your hands like this, it says, I cross my left thumb over my right thumb. I actually do it opposite. Here's my right thumb. And this feels very comfortable for me. So I'm the opposite. I always put my right over my left. If I do it the other way, it feels totally weird. And I never knew this until a couple years ago. But a lot of people do left over right opposed to right over left. I can see colors red and green. So colorblind people, mainly males, get this. It's not that they see black, white, or gray. It's hard for them to distinguish between colors red and green. I have allergies of any sort. Do you have to take allergy medicine during the spring? Are you allergic to peanuts? Something like that. The hairline on your forehead, is it straight? So like I hardly have any hair up here, but do you have a widow's peak? So it kind of goes up, then it comes back down at a point, then it goes back up. That would be a widow's peak. So that's not straight hairline, where a straight hairline is obviously straight across. And then I am a male or a female. So go ahead and do that. Pause the video for a second so you can finish that up if you haven't already done that. All right, so then this is what we did. We worked in groups, and you're not going to have a group, obviously. But we're going to tally this up. So underneath, yes, detached earlobes, they tallied this up. So if you had a group of 3, right, and 2 of them do have detached earlobe, you'd mark 2 here and then 1 here. And so we're really looking at our yeses. Can their tongue rolls and stuff like that. So we went over here, and within their groups, they went ahead and put this along their independent, our x-axis. This is our y-axis. So remember, our y-axis, y to the sky, and x is flat like this. Our dependent variable goes over here. So our dependent variable will change. If you're dependent upon somebody, that means you will change based on what they do. Okay? And our independent variable here is our traits. Our traits will not change. Okay. So anyways, what these guys did was detached earlobes. There was 2 people, so wham, bam, that had 2, and that was that. Roll tongue. So if there were 3 people that could roll their tongues, then you draw this, okay, which obviously you cannot. But then let's go ahead and take a look at this. So we did our class traits here. So what we did was we compiled all of the class data, okay, and we found that 15, this was second hour, so we found that 15 had detached earlobes, 15 could roll their tongues, 8 had dimples, right, 19 of us were right-handed out of 21, I think, in that second hour, 11 out of 21, so the max was 21 people that we had. 1% had a butt chin, stuff like that, okay, so we can see that stuff, which is pretty neat. If we go to this next class, we get different sorts of things. Detached earlobe, we have 16. Last class we had 15, so that's not too far off. Rolling tongue, we had 15 here. Tongue roll, this one was 18. So these guys are going to be somewhat similar. Some of them can be way off, but then we can put all of our classes together and even get some more accurate data. Okay, so then at the end, what all these guys did, or not all of them, I asked a few of them. I said, who wants to offer up what their trait inventory list looks like? And so what does that mean? Well, that means that I had them go through these, and whatever they checked yes or no on, I said, read it out. And so everybody had to stand up. And if the person said, I have detached earlobes, then you stay standing. So if you have the same trait as this person, then you would stay standing until, let's say, this person says, I can roll my tongue, but you can't. So you would then sit down. So by the end of it, nobody was standing up. So what it meant was you are genetically unique individual because of your order of this. So a lot of people have detached earlobes. A lot of people have attached earlobes. However, and a lot of people can roll their tongues. A lot of people can't. A lot of people have dimples. A lot of people can. A lot of people are right-handed, so on and so forth. However, it's the combination of these guys that makes us unique. Okay, so like sexual reproduction, right? Our offspring are going to be genetically unique. They're going to be different. So we use all of these physical traits that we can physically see. But the biggest thing probably is things we've talked about, our immune system, right? If a disease comes through a population, your immune system is going to be something different to look at. And there's going to be multiple traits probably that make up our immune system. But tracking our immune system and trying to do it in a yes-no fashion like this is you can't do it, not accurately. So it's hard for us to do that. Or can you, and we're talking about any organism, right? Not just about human beings, but let's say there's a drought that comes by and you're an organism that really depends on water. Some organisms within your population can probably last a little bit longer than others and can outlast the others. And then maybe a rain comes along. Now you have a population full of these organisms that can withstand less water and makes them the ones that go on, right? And how do we measure that stuff? That's really hard. Or if there's a food shortage and stuff like that. But anyways, you can see how it starts getting more complicated if I kind of lost you there. So we're really simplifying it with physical features like this, okay? And so it's just real simple as of right now. So after we got done doing this, we filled this out. We went ahead and I gave this out. So we have a reading here. And at the end, I only assigned questions right here. I assigned questions 1, 4, and 5. Okay. And so it talks about alleles are described as being dominant or recessive. What's the difference between a dominant and recessive allele? Then it asks about Gregor Mendel, an Austrian monk who lived in the 1800s, is known as the father of genetics. Explain why Mendel has been given this title. And then 5 says, if an organism expresses a recessive phenotype, can you tell the genotype? Explain your answer by giving an example. All right, so this stuff is it's like, when have we ever talked about this? Well, we talked about it, but we just never gave it a name in this video, I should say. And so let's look at what is an allele. Okay, so an allele right here, it says the different forms of a trait that a gene may have are called alleles. Okay, so an allele in one sex cell may control one form of the trait, such as having facial dimples. So we talked about dimples. The allele in the other sex cell may control having a different form of the traits, which is not having dimples. Okay, so meaning maybe your parent, right, that had the egg passed on a trait of dimples, while your other parent with the sperm passed on a trait of no dimples, right? So you have a trait about dimples, and then an allele is one form or the other form, dimples or no dimples, right? And so now it's talking about which one's dominant, which one's going to show over the other, okay? And so let's come down here and use this example. Here we have a dominant trait or a dominant allele, same thing, recessive allele, recessive trait, okay? And this guy named Gregor Mendel that we kind of mentioned earlier in one of the questions, he said he grew a whole bunch of pea plants. Super boring, right? Anyways, he's a father of genetics, so he can do that stuff. So our trait here is shape of seeds. And so he found that we could either have a round or a wrinkled seed. The color of the seed, we could have yellow or green. The color of the pods, green or yellow. The shape of the pods, they're either full or they're flat, but they have the constricted around the peas. The tall plant or the short. The flowers, are they at the where it branches off, or at the tips? Do they have purple flowers? Do they have white flowers? Okay. And so these are all the different, these guys right in here, again, are dominant or recessive. And so how do we know which one's dominant? How do we know which one's recessive? Well, let's take a look at this. So this top row, Gregor Mendel had to do a whole bunch of tests, okay? He had to do a whole bunch of tests and figured out that these are our dominant alleles compared to these guys. So essentially, what does this mean? Let's take a look down here. So it says, if I'm talking about this, he says this process, he cross-pollinated some of these guys. So he took a purebred, Mendel used pollen from flowers and purebred tall plants to pollinate by hand with the flowers of purebred short plants. So he took a whole bunch of these tall pea plants over here. He took a whole bunch of these short pea plants over here, and he made sure that they cross-pollinated. Okay? And so he found, so up here, if we look, he took a whole bunch of these tall plants, and so dominant trait is tall, and he took a whole bunch of short plants, and he made sure that these guys pollinated with these guys, and back and forth. he found that the tall plants crossed with the short plants produced seeds that all produced tall plants. Okay, so he took all of these tall, all of these shorts, he put them together, and then the offspring. So where we see the traits being passed on is through the offspring. In the offspring, there was nothing but tall plants, and so we call this the dominant version, or we call this the dominant allele. It says factor here. You can substitute that word factor for allele or for trait. Mendel called this tall form the dominant factor because it dominated, or it covered up, the short form, meaning the reason why we didn't see the short form in the offspring is because it was covered up by the tall allele. Okay. He called the form that seemed to have disappeared the recessive allele, or the recessive factor. So the recessive one is the one that's covered up. Okay. And so your parents will pass on dominant alleles, they'll pass on recessive alleles, and then some of those alleles will dominate, and the dominant ones are the ones that show through, that you will exhibit. Whereas the the ones that are passed on, right? You do get these recessive ones passed on. However, if there's a dominant one that's also passed on from the other parent, it will mask, or it will cover up our recessive one. So we'll go over this a lot more. There's going to be a lot to digest here in this section. So here's the basis of what Gregor Mendel did. Is he took yellow pea pods, he took green pea pods, and he crossed these two. And here's the first generation right here. These four guys. Okay, and the reason why he uses four, so we're going to start doing Punnett squares. There's going to be four squares in a Punnett square. Well, how many offspring are there after meiosis? There's four, right? We're talking about 4 eggs, 4 sperms. And so when we cross these in the possibilities, we come up with different possibilities. That's all I'm going to say about that now. I'll put what it really means. We'll go over Punnett squares in the next video. Like I said, there's a lot of information here. But anyways, before all of this, one of the so-called parent plants in Gregor Mendel's had pods that were green, which is a dominant trait, and the other plant had yellow pods, which are a recessive trait. So he crossed the green, which he thinks is dominant. He crosses the yellow, which he thinks is dominant. And lo and behold, what's the only trait that pops up? And it's our green trait, green pea pod. So therefore, it must be dominant because it's masking, right? It's masking the yellow. However, so now we go to the second generation. And so these are like the grandkids, right? If you're keeping up. So grandma, grandpa, here's their kids, and here's one of your parents, right? And one of your parents then find a mate, and then they produce 3 greens and 1 yellow. So this trait that was passed on by your grandparents, it's still in there, right? They passed it on. However, it was just covered up by the other grandparents. But then as we go on, this recessive allele can pop up in later generations, okay? So if you ever heard anything like you get this trait from your grandma or grandpa or something like that, that's actually true. A trait can be passed down to your parents but not show, but then your parent can then pass that trait that doesn't show through down to you, and then it could show into you as well. Okay, that's a lot, right? A lot of info here. So like I said, we're really not talking about Punnett squares today. We'll save that for another time. But then here for your last one, it's going to ask you about Punnett squares. Read a little bit about the Punnett squares, but here it's going to ask you what's genotype, phenotype, and how do we discuss genotype, phenotype in regards to them being a homozygous or a heterozygous. That one's going to be a tough one. I understand. Do your best, though. And like I said, we'll talk about it on Friday. All right, bye.